Welcome. Today we're diving into a really provocative lecture from Professor Zhang Shouqin. It starts with a simple, kind of mind-blowing premise and one massive question.
All right, let's just get straight to it. If the whole system can basically create money out of thin air, why does poverty even exist? I mean, it's a paradox, right? It seems to break everything we've ever been taught about economics. To find the professor's answer, well, we have to go back to the very beginning.
So how did a system like this even get started? Well, according to the professor, it all began with early merchants who were just trying to make trade safer. And in doing so, they stumbled upon something that would literally change the world.
Okay, let's break this down, because this is where the magic trick happens. So imagine a merchant deposits $5 million in gold. The bank gives them a receipt. It's really just a contract, a promise, and that receipt starts getting used as money. But then, another merchant comes in asking for a loan. The bank doesn't give them the physical gold, no. They just issue another receipt for $5 million. All of a sudden, there's $10 million in receipts circulating, all based on that original $5 million in gold. The money supply is literally instantly doubled.
And this right here gets to the very heart of the professor's point. Money isn't the gold in the vault, it's the promise. It's a social idea, something we create through trust. But you can probably guess, a system built only on promises is, well, it's incredibly fragile.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how these early bankers protected themselves from the enormous risks they had just created. I mean, they had to find a way to make this fragile system actually last.
So what could possibly go wrong when you've promised out twice as much gold as you actually have? Well, it turns out there are two huge existential threats. First, you've got the classic bank run. If everyone with a receipt shows up at once demanding their gold, the bank just collapses because, it doesn't have enough. And second, there's a problem of power. Their biggest clients were kings and nobles who needed cash for wars. But what happens when a king just decides, you know what, I'm not going to pay you back?
The professor argues that their solution was to form cartels. These were basically partnerships, often sealed by marrying into each other's families, creating this tight-knit network of allied banks. So if one bank faced a run, the others would swoop in and bail it out. And if a king refused to pay his debts, the cartel could just finance his enemy, making sure that debt got settled one way or another.
And here is the crucial connection. The professor claims that this alliance of powerful private banks, this cartel, wasn't just some old-world solution. No, it became the direct blueprint for our modern central banking system.
Which brings us right back to our original, nagging question. If this powerful system can create infinite money, why are people still poor? Well, the answer most of us would give is based on what the professor calls a really powerful illusion.
You see, the common answer is scarcity. This idea that there just isn't enough to go around. But the professor's claim is blunt. That's a fiction. We just saw how money can be created from nothing. In principle, it's an infinite resource.
In the professor's own words, the idea of scarcity isn't some natural law of the universe. It's a belief that's been drilled into us. He argues that even when you're shown that money is infinite, that brainwashing's so deep, it's really, really hard to shake.
So if scarcity isn't the real reason for poverty, then what is? This is where the lecture presents its most challenging and maybe its most radical idea. The professor's core thesis is this: poverty isn't some flaw in the system, it's a necessary feature. Its real purpose is to make money seem scarce and therefore valuable.
Let's walk through the logic here. The argument goes like this. If there were no poor people, there'd be no fear of poverty. And without that fear, our motivation to work really hard for money would just plummet. And according to this theory, the system needs you to want that money, because the real value it's actually designed to extract from you is your work.
And that really lands the argument with incredible force. In this view, poverty isn't a personal failure. It's not some accident of circumstance. It's an intentionally maintained condition, a tool that the system uses to make sure it keeps functioning.
But the theory doesn't just stop with poverty. The professor actually extends this exact same logic to explain even bigger global events, the kind we often see as these unavoidable, terrible catastrophes.
Okay. So if the goal is to keep us all working for a resource that's supposedly scarce, what happens when too much wealth starts to build up? And why do we have these catastrophic things like market crashes and wars?
The common belief, right, is that we fight wars over limited resources, which just reinforces that whole idea of scarcity. But the professor's theory completely flips this on its head. He argues that these events aren't about fighting for wealth, they're about systematically destroying it.
And why on earth would you destroy wealth? Well, because if too much money exists in the system, it starts to lose its perceived value. A crisis or a war, it's like a reset button. It wipes out wealth, makes resources feel scarce all over again, and powerfully reinforces our motivation to get back to work and rebuild everything.
So this all leads to the final core takeaway of the lecture, really understanding what the system is truly designed to produce. And according to the professor, it isn't money.
The professor uses this really powerful modern analogy to explain this whole thing. Think about a giant online game like World of Warcraft. Players work tirelessly for hours and hours for in-game gold. Now, the game developers could, with just a single keystroke, give everyone infinite gold. But they don't. Why not? Because if they did, the game would be pointless. That artificial scarcity is what drives all the activity.
And that, right there, is the final takeaway from this lecture. The economic system, in this view, isn't a machine for generating wealth for everybody. It's a machine for generating human activity. The real product isn't the money. The real product is our labor.
So we're left with this one final lingering question that kind of reframes our entire relationship with the economy. Is the whole point of it all for us to acquire a supposedly scarce resource? Or is that resource, the money, just a tool to make sure we all keep working? It's a challenging idea to sit with. Thanks for tuning in.